Good morning, everyone. We'll take up today two sessions in the broad area of psychoanalysis and philosophy. I think we are into session 11 and 12, but I have to check it. So today I have taken up 10 thematic issues for discussion, broadly in the area of psychoanalysis and philosophy. And these are issues which are coming to me as questions from students of psychoanalysis, therapists, intellectuals who are interested in transdisciplinary studies. So let me deal with the 10 issues today in two parts. In present session 11, we'll deal with 5 issues. Second session, which is the 12th session in psychoanalysis and philosophy, we'll deal with another 5 issues. So let us get into the first 5 issues. Questions have come, very interesting questions, on difference between guilt and shame and their connection to yin and yang or Purush and Prakriti in the philosophical context, and anima and animus in the psychoanalytic context. So let us go into guilt and shame in terms of the basics, and then try to connect it to the feminine and the masculine. Guilt is a very individual emotion. Shame is more social. So let us first go into what guilt is. Guilt is a bite of remorse, a criticism of conscience, a bite of conscience, a feeling of dis-ease when we do something that we believe is wrong. And this depends largely on the value system that we have. The value system, of course, comes from society, largely. Part of it is natural also, but largely comes from society. But this is an area where the individual makes his own, in a real, genuine sense, a value. So guilt is something that you would feel as a bite of conscience if you do something wrong in your view, even if you are alone and nobody else is going to know about it. So if I go to a jungle and I do something, let's say I pluck a fruit from a tree which belongs to somebody, and I don't feel bad about it unless I am caught. So if left to myself when I am alone and nobody is going to know what I do, in that situation, if I feel bad about something, we are dealing with guilt. So the guilt is individual. Even if society is not there, I would still feel bad doing that thing. Shame is something social. I feel bad about it because I know it will invite censor from society, criticism from society. So shame is a very social phenomenon. In fact, many people go to the extent of saying shame is the master social phenomenon, master social effect. Shame is very important because we are herd animals, and abandonment by the herd can easily mean difficulty of survival. Not to mention the emotional aspects of abandonment also are very biting, very painful. So guilt is individual, so shame is social. Guilt is the bite of conscience which we feel even if we know that nobody is going to come to know what we have done. And shame is the bite of conscience which we feel when we realize what will happen if somebody knows about it, or actually somebody knows about it and they criticize us about what we have done. So shame is a very social phenomena. Some people also call it a master social effect. And guilt is very individual. Often people ask this question, what is stronger, guilt or shame? And it differs from individual to individual, society to society. There are some societies where the element of shame is very strong, in some societies where the element of shame is not so strong. If we look at more individual driven modern Western societies, the element of shame is very low. If we look at many of the Asian countries, the element of shame is much higher. If we look at tribal societies, or if we look at earlier Japanese society or earlier Indian society, the element of shame is very high. Many people, after committing certain act or before committing an act, they often say it is better to die than to face everyone after having committed X action. That is more seen in traditional societies. As societies move from being more traditional to more modern and more westernized, more individualistic, the element of shame reduces. In fact, the element of guilt also reduces, but the element of shame proportionately reduces far more than does the element of guilt. So the modern societies are far less superego societies than the earlier societies were. In fact, if we divide historical period into early, medieval and modern, we are moving from superego society to ego society to id society. And we are also moving to less guilt and less shame societies. Coming back to the central question that was asked, how to connect guilt and shame to yin and yang, masculine and feminine. Guilt is more masculine and stable. Shame is more feminine and fluid. So if we wish to classify guilt and shame into masculine and feminine, it is not usually done, but since the question has come, and if we force classify, we go into guilt getting into the masculine area basket and shame moving into the feminine basket. Shame is very fluid, like a person moving from India to USA might redefine certain acts. Certain acts might be shameful in India, but if he resettles in USA, he emigrates to USA after a few years, he doesn't feel that thing to be shameful anymore. But guilt compared to shame is far more stable and masculine. Guilt often results, the outcome of guilt usually is a feeling of disgust and a feeling of anger, often accompanied by pain. But the first two feelings are first feeling is usually of anger, then of disgust, and then of pain. Usually this anger is anger at oneself, and it becomes self-destructive. One punishes oneself in variety of ways, by not being successful, by creating psychological problems, by creating psychosomatic problems. So we have this whole range of guilt pathology, what we call superego pathology. And superego pathology is generally equated with guilt pathology, but actually if you go deeper, superego pathology has both the areas, the guilt pathology and the shame pathology. Those who come with a stronger background of cohort and this whole theorizing about shame, they talk about shame pathology. But those who come with classical Freudian, Kleinian background, they usually talk about guilt pathology as almost synonymous with superego pathology. But factually speaking, superego pathology contains both guilt pathology and shame pathology. The general idea one gets in guilt is to punish oneself, to give pain to oneself, almost to the extent of erasing oneself. And the first idea in shame it comes is to erase the event. And if you cannot erase the event which led to shame, then the second thought is to erase oneself. But in guilt, the event is secondary. It is more, why did I do it? In shame, the event is primary generally, why did it happen that way? In guilt, anger is usually a very strong emotion. In shame, embarrassment and shyness. And the feeling is this: to hide oneself, to withdraw and recoil. Recoiling into oneself, like contracting and recoiling into oneself, is a very important feeling in shame. The feeling is to recoil into oneself, contract oneself, and get into a closet, hide oneself, go into the room and close the door, hide oneself. And inside the room, there is a inner feeling as though one should vanish. One should cease to exist, one should vanish. At times there is a feeling that I should exist, but I should cease, I should vanish from here and exist somewhere else. At times there is a feeling that I should vanish and I should not exist. These are shades of feelings which come up in the face of intense shame. Lighter versions are of embarrassment and shyness in shame. Lighter versions of shame. So when we talk of superego pathology, we have the guilt pathology and we have the shame pathology. Guilt pathology largely goes into anger towards oneself, and shame pathology largely goes towards I am not good enough. In both these cases, I don't deserve can come up. In both the cases, inferiority can come up. In both the cases, movement away from society, avoidance of society can come up. In both the cases, fear of being caught can come up. Both are on a continuum, shame and guilt. The opposite of something guilt provoking, something profane, is sacred. So we have this continuum of something sacred to something guilt provoking. And this is not the same as something religious to something legal. This is a separate continuum. This is something that inwardly you feel sacred, not what is prescribed in the religion that you subscribe to. This is a very authentic thing, very individual thing. So there is a continuum of the sacred to the guilt provoking. And similarly, there is a continuum of fame to shame. And obviously, we are moving on both these continuums all the time. Especially fame is one of the very strong emotions and motivations we have, which we don't recognize as such. Neither individually nor in society nor in our academic systems. We are not trained for it. It's a desire that society believes we should not own up. And this is true even for the so-called liberated Western societies. The individual owning up his desire for fame is not a usual thing. It's a very rare thing. So in therapy, often we have to work on it. Acceptance of this desire of fame and the fear of sliding onto a continuum of shame towards shame. In therapy, both of them have to be explored and they will come up. When we have personality disorders, we find both problems of guilt and of shame. In most personality disorders, we find superego pathology at work through both of them. But in general, if we look at dependent personalities, the shame is higher than guilt. And in narcissistic personalities, we find both. In some cases, guilt more than shame. In some cases, shame more than guilt. Clinicians believe that shame is generally more than guilt, but we also find situations where the guilt is more than shame. So this is a short discussion on guilt and shame. How they work out in various pathologies is a detailed subject. The core is they should not go unaddressed in therapy and never, at least in personality disorders. Second question has come up related to homeopathy. Can it be combined with psychotherapy and what are the side effects? Are there side effects of homeopathy at all? So this is something where we need discussion. Often for many individuals, only psychotherapy is not enough. They need additional support. So if we are talking of severe cases, obviously every severe case needs medicines, but even in case of certain moderate to severe range individuals, some support is needed in addition to therapy. And the support can be homeopathy, Ayurveda, allopathy, whatever the person chooses. Some people choose homeopathy. Some people develop very strong side effects with allopathy. Some people ideologically believe in homeopathy. And therefore, the combination of psychotherapy and homeopathy is a very tried and tested combination. And many people report very good results out of it. So this is getting more increasingly popular. And perhaps therefore the question has come. So the first part is, are there any side effects of homeopathy? I can say basis of my personal experience, yes, there are side effects of homeopathy, which homeopaths generally don't acknowledge. And this is a part of their not being honest, very unfortunate. I have been an asthmatic patient for many years, and many homeopathic medicines that I have been given have produced very severe side effects. So on the basis of my personal experience, I can say there are side effects of homeopathy. If you are given a wrong drug, homeopathic drug, or if you are very sensitive, or long-term homeopathic medication has increased the sensitivity of your system, or if the potency or the power of the homeopathic drug is very high. So the first is side effects of homeopathy do exist. Usually, if the drug is not of very high power, the side effects get automatically reversed by themselves in 4 days. After first 12 to 14 hours, you start feeling some relief, and over a 4-day period, it goes away. But if it is high potency, then it goes on for a long time, and it can take 1 week to 2 weeks. Although doctors say 4 days, it doesn't happen that way. So I feel what the theory says and what we experience in practice are two different things. The theory needs revision because you can't challenge experience. So high potency can take up to 1 week for the full effects to go away. And if high potency has been given for a very long time and it's a wrong drug, then certain things can, acute episodes not only can precipitate, they can continue for a long time. So with high potency of homeopathic drugs, one has to be very careful. And the unfortunate part is there is no antidote for most aggravations. Like if you have been given a medicine and there is an aggravation, if you go to a homeopath, they will just ask you to wait for 4 days. They won't, in most cases, they won't be able to give any medication which can undo the aggravation. And so in most cases, you have to take allopathy to control that aggravation if it cannot be accepted, if it's not bearable. And I have seen very few homeopaths are good in this area, in the area of aggravations. So if they give you one medicine and it aggravates, now to know what other medicine is likely to cause and should not be given, very few homeopaths are good in this area. And most also refuse to accept the aggravations when they come. They try to explain it away by saying it might be unrelated to the medicine. So this is an area where we need more legal empowerment of patients, some neutral places to where patients can go and get officially diagnosed as suffering from side effects of medicine. And if it happens, then what is the antidote? And if there is no antidote, then what is the allopathic antidote? In certain cases, homeopathy may not work or may take a long time to take effect. And during that time, support from allopathy would be a must. And there are two parts of homeopathy. One, it's a wonderful medicine. I believe it will be the core medicine of future. But at present, the claims and understanding as it is, as the homeopaths claim, are actually exaggerated. It's a wonderful medical pathy. I personally go for it before going for anything else. So I rate it as number one in my preference, but the claims are exaggerated. The understanding claimed in that pathy also is exaggerated. When we come to use in psychotherapy, of course, psychotherapists in India cannot prescribe anything. They have to send it to a homeopath for prescription. But here also the selection of potency is not without a trial and error. And there have been cases where in a bipolar situation, somebody has jumped from the lower cycle to the higher cycle after taking the homeopathic drug. So those cases also are there. But on the whole, it's a wonderful pathy, and psychotherapy, homeopathy is a very good combination. No pathy is perfect. So in healing, we get this fundamental principle after a few years that everything works on someone and nothing works on everyone. So we have to do a mix and match as patients. And as we move towards integrative medicine and holistic medicine, things are coming together. So I would say it's a very good combination, psychotherapy, homeopathy, but there are side effects and we have to be careful. And it's not easy to find the right medicine in homeopathy for a patient. That's the whole game. That's where the whole game is. And very few homeopaths actually are good enough to find the right medicine and get the triangle right. The remedy, potency, and dosage. It's not easy to get that triangle right, and few homeopaths can get it right quickly. Usually it's a trial and error, goes on for 3 to 6 months before one is able to figure out the right medicine. But it's a wonderful medicine to get into combo, especially for those who don't want the side effects of allopathy. Some homeopaths also claim that homeopathy can cure through the roots things which are difficult to cure, like personality disorders, psychosis, and things of that sort. So there is an area of exaggerated claiming. Not everyone who goes there gets healed, and to show exception as a rule is to mislead people. So the real expression would be, truthful expression would be, out of 100 personality disorders come, how many get cured completely, how many are cured 75%, how many are cured 50%, how many are cured 25%, how many don't respond at all, and how many face side effects. That kind of classification is something that we look forward to coming out from homeopathy journals into public domain, in popular discourse. Let's hope it happens in the next 5 years. Third question is related to the research cartel. Is there a research cartel in psychoanalysis? And is it there in psychology in general? Answer to that question is yes. Yes, there is a research cartel in psychoanalysis. There is a research cartel in psychotherapy, in psychology, in entire Western world per se. There is a research cartel. There is a Western academia research cartel, and there is a research cartel in every area in the Western world. So let us go into how does that research cartel operate in general, and it operates in psychoanalysis in largely the same way. So the first point where the research cartel operates is at the point of knowledge generation, and second, knowledge dissemination. These two are key points, key areas of the whole knowledge system. If we divide the whole knowledge system into two, knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, there is a cartel here, there is a cartel here. In every area of knowledge, not only psychoanalysis. In the knowledge generation area, the cartel works essentially. Before we go there, these cartels are largely ideological, and part of the cartels are driven by money. If we just detail it out, the research cartels or the knowledge cartels that we are talking about, they are of various types. They are ideological cartels based upon communism, capitalism, feminism, environmentalism, and combinations of them, the wokeism. Then there are commercial cartels, which are essentially around intellectual property in the pharma area related to selling certain medicines or certain equipment and instruments, certain food items. And then there are LGBT cartels trying to advance the cause of LGBT and perpetuate almost a kind of a reverse discrimination on the heterosexual society with the help of these cartels. So LGBT cartels are self-serving cartels and the reverse discrimination cartels. How do they operate? They operate essentially as, first, when it comes to knowledge generation, these cartels become gatekeepers. How do they become gatekeepers? Knowledge generation starts from the journals, academic journals. And there are two important elements of the academic journals: the editors of the journals and the reviewers of the papers. So the cartels appoint their people as editors and as reviewers of papers. So which paper will get published and which paper will not get published is decided by these gatekeepers, the editors and reviewers. And that is how they control the knowledge generation system. Because if something is not published in academic journals, it does not usually find its way to the textbooks or to the reference books, and therefore does not reach people in general. So these are the gatekeepers. In certain areas, they appoint niche reviewers. So some people of the cartel, they become niche reviewers. So in certain areas, when the area is micro-focused, there are very few reviewers. And these reviewers belong to a cartel. So in that niche area, whatever paper you write ultimately goes to that same 5-10 people. Then you don't have more than 5-10 people in that micro area. And these 5-10 people are associated to a ideological cartel or some sort of cartel. Then there is a circular citation loop. So the cartel, because only the cartel is able to publish, or those that the cartel allows to publish are ready to able to publish, it creates a singularity of opinion, a singularity of intellectual atmosphere, and it starts circular citation loop. I quote you, you quote X, X quotes B. So there are 4 people quoting each other, and that's where the truth keeps going in a merry-go-round in a circle around those 4 people. Diversity is completely out of the window. Any radical thought is completely out of the window. A critique of a prevailing ideology is out of the window. And today, this entire gatekeeping and reviewing is captured, has been captured by the left, LGBT and MNC driven cartels. In food and pharma, it is the MNC driven cartels. In science and technology, there are few MNC driven cartels, but not many. And in the humanities and social sciences, it is a leftist cartel and a LGBT cartel. So they create a circular citation loop, and if you don't fall into that circular citation loop, you get rejected because you are not developing new knowledge using existing knowledge, and existing knowledge is falsely equated with knowledge generated in the circular citation loop. Then we have the funding of the research. That is a corporate way or government's ideological way or ideologues who have got into the government, their way of funding the research. And people say outcome of research depends on who funds the research. So you have motivated research, not clean research, very motivated propaganda research. This is not scientific research, this is propaganda research. So this is one form of influencing knowledge generation. And then we have knowledge dissemination. So there you occupy all the important positions in the university and don't allow anybody from a contesting ideology to come in. So you create a homo lesbo academic group or commercially driven, funded by a few pharma companies or think tank kind of a research cartel in the university. Or you have a political cartel also in the university. In some countries, you also have teachers unions or teachers associated to political parties. A very open political cartel in academia. In India, in many states, you have it very openly that complete cartels in the university are affiliated indirectly to a political party. So much so that universities get labeled as a leftist university or rightist university. Fortunately, internet has loosened up this whole thing. It is no longer as autocratic as it used to be. One of the difficulties here is what I call the BA, MA, PhD syndrome. People who have never got out of the campus. They did their bachelor's, their master's, their doctoral program and became faculty members. And they are the ones who play mischief, who have no idea about how real world works. My personal belief is after the post-graduation, one should be made to work in the real world, in something where you are actually in touch with reality, like army, police, business, politics, administration, and only then allowed to come back to the academic campus to do a PhD. Otherwise, we have completely unrealistic cloud nine kind of academics, and the whole world laughs at them. And what they say has no relevance in reality. It's a very make-believe world of that 2-kilometer campus of the university, and they actually spoil the students with all kinds of rubbish that they pass off as knowledge. And this is even worse in psychotherapy, where people without any life experience, just with that BA, PhD route, start off as therapists. Because psychotherapy is a very life experience intense profession. It is not a ordinary academic thing which you can do only on the college campus. It is not a pass the exam and do the internship kind of thing. It's a very real life experience intense area. One area where you can see all of this operating is the area of holistic healing. So when we talk about pranic healing, homeopathy, Ayurveda, Siddha, or putting all these things together to create a holistic basket for an individual, that is where we can see how research is inhibited. Knowledge generation is repressed by these cartels. And these cartels are both ideological cartels as well as pharmaceutical company cartels. And knowledge dissemination also is inhibited by the same cartel. So you can see the effect of the research cartel if you go to the healing space in the area of holistic healing. How we are not allowing tools and ideas from holistic healing to come into psychotherapy, psychology in general, or healing in general. on a wider landscape. So we see inhibition, distortion, censorship, disrespect, propaganda, all in full play in the whole knowledge system, be it in knowledge generation or knowledge dissemination owing to cartels. And actually these are full knowledge cartels. I should not have said research cartel. I should have said knowledge cartel, but they operate most intensely in the area of research and also in the area of dissemination. Let me just correct it. I think this is a better title. There are full knowledge cartels that operate both in knowledge generation and knowledge dissemination and most intensely in the area of research. Third question is related to the desire to suffer. And this is something we find very paradoxically in psychotherapy. That deep inside there is a desire to suffer, and there are two parts of the person. The healthy part of the person brings the person to therapy, and there is a sick part of the person that wants to suffer and does not want to get well. And the person does not have actually a very strong desire, a very strong will to get well. The will is actually bifurcated into two. A part of the will wants to get well, and a part of the will does not want to get well. And this is a important point that has come up. Does the desire to suffer exist? Yes, it exists. And this is contrary to ordinary pleasure principle that we talk of in psychoanalysis, that human beings are pleasure-seeking creatures and the goal of the psyche is maximization of pleasure. Contrary to that, there is a desire to suffer. And there are two aspects to it. How we explain it? Freud explained it in two ways. Freud said, when we look at suffering, suffering is on the surface, but deep inside there is also pleasure. So the symptom at the unconscious level is also giving pleasure. So when we see the desire to suffer, actually it is also a desire for pleasure, because both of them will go together if the symptom is resolved. But the pleasure is so addictive, so relishable, that we don't want to give it up even if we have to suffer. So even as consciously we suffer the symptom, unconsciously there is a enjoyment, a jouissance, a pleasure which is unconscious. So this is one explanation why there is desire to suffer, because unconsciously it is giving far more pleasure than the conscious suffering. So it's a profitable business in that sense. Second explanation is that it is not the overall profitable pleasure, rather it is not the unconscious pleasure more than offsetting the conscious suffering. Rather, there is suffering, there is pleasure in suffering itself. And this was termed by Freud as masochism, that there is a masochism whereby we enjoy suffering at a deeper level. And that does not have to do with the unconscious content which is giving us pleasure. It is suffering generically being pleasurable unconsciously. So there is this element of masochism. And the third element is when in some cases We are suffering the symptom because we want to take revenge from somebody, and by hurting ourselves, we are hurting somebody, either as a substitute or indirectly making the person suffer by seeing us suffering. So these are the three reasons why the desire to suffer exists. One important element in this area is that when you have this suffering for a long time, there is an equilibrium which is established. And over a long period of time, if you are in the equilibrium, a pathological equilibrium, of course, where the symptom exists, you suffer from the symptom. At the same time, there are secondary gains, and you continue with life to a reasonable extent with some degree of success and pleasure, some degree of reality dexterity. There, you find safety after a period of time in that pathological equilibrium. And this I call as the tragic holding state. That in one sense it is tragic because it involves limitations and suffering. At the same time, it is thought of as a holding state because in that state somehow you have survived for a long time and you also have made some progress, much lesser than what we would have made otherwise, but still you have made some progress. And you feel satisfied with it in general, and therefore you don't want to leave this tragic holding state. And you find safety in that pathological equilibrium. The will to get well is a very important element. This is one of the first things that we have to mobilize and marshal in the healing process. If it is not there, then we have to settle for the next best will to explore oneself. In some therapies which are very demanding, like ISTDP, we just go into will to get well and we don't settle for will to explore oneself, but in many therapies we settle for it, hoping it will eventually get to will to get well. And essentially we are dealing here with the healthy part versus the pathological part. So when we don't have the will to get well, we discuss it with the person and we respect the will to suffer. In certain therapies like ISTDP, we may not respect the will to suffer, we may condemn it, criticize it, directly or indirectly. But I usually take the softer route. I discuss with the person and I respect their will to suffer. And when we discuss and respect their will to suffer, we do it with sincerity, not with sarcasm. That we sincerely respect their will to suffer. They have a right to will whatever they wish to will. And if they have will to suffer, we respect that right. And we make it explicit to them and discuss with it. Conscious discussion is a great tool for change here. We go into complete acceptance and let us accept it completely. Can we accept it completely? Can we just accept it that there is a will to suffer? And we hope, along with the patient, we tell the patient that we hope that we are together, we keep working together, and there will be a will to health someday. We accept that it is not there at present, but we hope it will be there. And we also say that it's sad that the will to health is not there. So we first bring it up in discussion, we respect it with sincerity, we accept it completely, Talk of hope, and also talk of sadness. It is sad that it is not there. And you still have to suffer for quite some time. And there is a price to be paid. And it is sad that you will have to pay the price. And then we ask the person to do it consciously. If the desire for to suffer is so strong, it cannot be overcome by reason or will. We ask him to do it consciously and also observe conscious pleasure, how it gives pleasure in a secret way, if possible. And this, without confrontation, just making it conscious. When something is very strong and pathological, and confrontation does not work, conscious living it out works. So we can ask the person to consciously live it out. And that becomes then one of the quickest way of changing. And the process is much swifter and far more hopeful. If we just do a head-on collision, a very severe confrontation, the therapy will end. If we keep fighting it by interpretation, just go on forever, the person will keep fighting us. If we be on his side, we accept it and ask him just to do it consciously, whatever he's doing. That then becomes a very swift process of change and healing. The fifth question relates to the optimum zone. It's a very important question because human beings find it very difficult to be in the optimum zone in any area. In every area of life, there is an optimum zone. But we go into hypozone or the hyperzone, not in the optimum zone. That is true in psychotherapy also. Because we find in most cases we are dealing with the continuum, and it is said worst enemy of an idea is not the opposite idea but its own excess. When we go out of the optimum zone into excess on either side, excess rather on the hyper side, at times also on the hypo side, too much of scarcity and too much of excess, that is the undoing of an idea. The worst enemy of an idea is its own excess, not the opposite idea. You stretch the idea to absurdity, apply it out of context, and you go out of the optimum zone. So it's very necessary to have a good idea, to know which context to operate, and to apply it in the optimum zone. And any idea should also have a context, otherwise it decays. We can look at some philosophical applications of the optimum zone. Idealism and realism, how to apply it in real life. Empiricism and intuitionalism. How much should we go behavioral? How much should we go psychoanalytic? How much should we go psychoanalytic? How much should we go with Eastern healing methods? How much should we focus on logos? How much on eros? How much on the real and how much on the surreal? All these are questions of measure, balance, moderation, and focus. And the whole idea is to be in the optimum zone. The optimum zone being a different optimum zone for different people in different contexts. One implication of optimum zone is how much to do drugs, pharmacological drugs, and how much to do therapy. To use one school or use many schools and be eclectic. The optimum zone between the objective and the subjective, between the East and the West, between structuralism and post-structuralism. So you will have a continuum of structuralism, and the continuum of post-structuralism, put them together, you have a larger continuum of everything structured to nothing structured. So, in fact, my philosophy, the psychophilosophical model GEAT I have developed is based on the idea of the optimum zone. You can see more of this there. I call that large philosophy as holistic optimum pluralism of HOP. And I have detailed out how the holistic optimum pluralism as a concept can be applied to psychotherapy or in general to creating a vision for the world in the present situation or in developing the model of the mind, developing the model of pathogenesis, developing the model of healing. Thank you.